Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Exploring Mexico's Biodiversity, Part 2, and it will be presented by our fabulous NatHab expedition leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today. I absolutely loved Part 1, so I am thrilled that we're ready to see Part 2. So let's dive in.
Thank you, Sunny. Yes, I'm very excited too. Very happy to be back here. So let's start. Once again, my name is Melissa Silva. I'm a marine biologist. I am from, as I said before, from Mexico because I've been living in many areas around the country. So that's why I feel the need of sharing what I know about Mexico, about its culture and nature and everything that is related to it. So in this part 2, I will share some other information about Mexican biodiversity. So you all have a better understanding, a better idea of what Mexico has to offer for all our visitors and people that comes and live here. So just a short reminder from our past webinar. What's biodiversity? Well, in general terms, if we want just to resume that on a phrase, is the species richness of a given area. So there are different levels of biodiversity that we can use. It can be the species within an area, or the genetic biodiversity, the genetic diversity that is a diversity within one given species, or the ecosystem diversity, or the number of endemic species. So there are different ways of dividing what biodiversity means. In the world, there are a group of countries that are named megadiverse countries. There are 17 with a total of between 60 and 17% of all live species, and among those is Mexico. So in the country, we have around 12% of all Earth's biodiversity, with a high rate of endemisms, species that you only find in this country or in specific areas within the country. So why we are so biodiverse is because we are in a transition area between two regions in the world. We have the neotropical area, that is, of course, from the tropics to the equator area. And we are also part of the Nearctic area, that is from the tropics to the north part of the planet. So in this transition zone, we have a lot of mixes, a lot of links between one and other region, and that gives us a lot of variety in terms of weather, ecosystems, and of course species that come with them. We also have a very diverse topography or geography in the country. We have sierras, both sides. We actually have two coasts. We have sierras in both sides of the country, but also on the peninsula and in the central part. And we have some flatlands in both the coast also and the central part of Mexico. So we also have the plains area of the Yucatan Peninsula. So it's a mix of diverse altitudes that give us also within one area different microclimates or micro ecosystems. So even if you are in this area of Chiapas or Oaxaca, that is a mountainous area and tropical and a coast area, it's very humid. It's very like the vegetation is very tropical, jungle per se. And we also have conifer forest, for example, because we have highlands that are in the central part, like in this Balsas depression, in the central part of Oaxaca and Guerrero. So in this area that is a little bit drier than the others, you can have also conifer forest. So well, that's in terms of ecosystems and flora and fauna. Biodiversity, but we are also diverse in terms of geography and topography, as I mentioned. Why is that? This is because we are in the middle of some plates. Just to put it in general terms, it is three main plates: the Pacific, the North American, and the Caribbean. Cocos plate is a little bit smaller than the others, and as you can see, the Rivera and the Orozco plate are very, very small. They are right next here to the country. So all these, you can see some arrows right here that give us the movement, the main movement of these plates. So you can see that is the Pacific coast is a very active area in Mexico. And actually, because of that, we have a highly seismic area in this part of Mexico. So basically, most of the or all of the earthquakes that affect Mexico City come from this area on the south part of Mexico, and still we have some other seismic area and important movements in this north part of the Pacific coast in Mexico. This diagram, this map here, shows us the main volcanic axis, or the trans-Mexican volcanic belt. You can see it goes from side to side in the country. It starts, or any side, we can start here in the Gulf of Veracruz, and we go all the way, passing through Mexico City, Guadalajara City, and then it ends in this area of the Pacific coast by the Nayarit state. So the triangles that you see here, the clear ones are volcanoes that are dispersed in this area, and the darker triangles are the important volcanoes, or the active volcanoes that are considered dangerous nowadays. And then the green dots are some important earthquakes that have been happening in some hundreds of years. And here, for example, we have also bigger green dots, green circles, that are the major earthquakes that are on the scale, back on the day, the Richter scale of 7. So, well, you can see more or less how the disposition of this trench is and how it affects this part of Mexico. So with this, we have some very important peaks, some very important volcanoes in Mexico, such as the Nevado de Toluca or Sinantecatl, of course, the Popocatépetl volcano and the Iztaccíhuatl volcano that are right next to what is now Mexico City. Back on the day, it was called Distrito Federal. It was a federal district, but very recently it turned into another state in Mexico. And here in this area of Tlaxcala and Puebla is another volcano named La Malinche, and here it's the Pico de Orizaba, which is the highest peak in Mexico, and it's considered active still. So the Nevado de Toluca, the Sinantecatl volcano, a little bit over 5, is the 15,000 feet. It's located in the state of Mexico, close to the Toluca city. Of course, the Popocatépetl very close to Mexico City, but more closer to the Puebla state. Is in the border of these 3 states, the state of Mexico, Morelos, and Puebla, with almost 18,000 feet. You can see 17,802. The Iztaccíhuatl right next to the Popocatépetl, also in another border. La Malinche, that is considered also, sometimes it's considered the 3rd or the 4th highest peak. It depends who you ask. And the Pico de Orizaba volcano, very, very high. You can see 18,600 feet in average. So from these volcanoes, basically all of them are active, except the Toluca volcano, except this one here is not considered active, but it's considered dormant volcano. That means that it can be active any given moment. The Popocatépetl is an active volcano. Iztaccíhuatl is an inactive. That's not considered an active volcano, despite the closeness to the Popocatépetl. And the Iztaccíhuatl here, the Pico de Orizaba, is also considered an active volcano. So just another reminder of the principal ecosystems that I mentioned a little bit on my previous webinar on this series. On the north part of Mexico, as you can see with this reddish color, we have more like xeric shrublands, that means desertic areas or semi-desertic areas with its proper vegetation and fauna. On this area here that you can see, these green areas, the orange dots and orange stains here, we have the Western Sierra Madre. So that's why we have a lot of humidity that is captured here from the Pacific coast. That's why we have some tropical deciduous forest or some coniferous forest in this area of the Pacific slope. And then on the other hand, we can have more like plain lands, mangrove areas. And if we move from the tropical line that is somewhere here, where I'm pointing, we go down to in the country, we can find these wetlands or these very humid places, but still with some patches of grassland, even coniferous forest, or even some shrublands in central part here on Oaxaca and the highlands of Oaxaca. So from here, what we see today is basically this central part of Mexico, and later on we will have another webinar for the peninsula. So if we start with the Nayarit, Jalisco, and Colima states, we have on the Nayarit coast, the north part of Nayarit state, a place named Marismas Nacionales. A marisma is basically an estuary, it's a mangrove ecosystem, flatland, flooded area, and it's a mix here of mangrove ecosystem, tropical deciduous forest, and other 4 or 5, because it goes all the way in to the state, as you can see in this little map here. So it's a very important place in terms of course, biodiversity, but in terms of preserving the mangrove ecosystems in Mexico. The whole area of Marismas Nacionales represents about 20% of the total mangroves that we find in the country. And it's about 500 square miles in total. And of course, it has some representative species. Some of them are migratory birds, and it's actually considered Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. So that means it's important for breeding, resting, nesting for migratory birds in the North American area. And here we have a high population, just in those 500 plus square miles, we have a high population of jaguars, actually. So far, it has been identified 26 different animals of this species. So it's a very important area of conservation for that specific feline. And we have 4 species of mangrove trees from 5 that we have in Mexico. And I will go later on a deeper explanation with mangroves in a upcoming webinar. So on Jalisco state, we have this area on the central north part of Jalisco. Guadalajara city is right here where I have the laser showing. And then Tequila area is on the north of that. This is considered a World Heritage landscape, the Tequila landscape, the agave landscape, because, well, of course, it's a beautiful area to go to see. The weather over there is very beautiful most of the year. This on the background of these pictures, we have the Tequila volcano, so it's also an important area. It's an inactive volcano, but still it made a very fertile the soil for these crops. So well, the agave landscape is, you can see, very, very beautiful, very attractive. All the process of the tequila, of course, that I won't mention here. But what I want to mention is that it's an important area for bat conservation. There's an association or a project, Tequila Bat Friendly project, that is from the National University, Autonomous University of Mexico. And the idea here is that the farmers leave 5%, 10% of its land to bloom naturally, and that will help some migratory bats that we have in this area that rely almost 100% on the flowers, the nectar, and the pollen of these agave plants. So it's a very important area for conservation as well. And then the Colima state, it has a motto that says del volcán al mar, from the volcano to the sea. And it's basically, I think it is like all Mexico cropped in one little tiny state, because it has many, many different ecosystems. So it has 10 municipalities, and in all those 10 municipalities, we can find up to 9 ecosystems. So we have volcanic areas on the central part, on the part that is farther away from inland, let's say, farther from the coast. And then we go down from those highlands up to some estuary areas. So we have the volcano of is the snowy volcano of Colima, Volcán Nevado, and then is the fire volcano of Colima. You can see both of them here. This is the active fire volcano of Colima, and this is the snow or snowy volcano. So this is one of the towns. This the convent is from a town named Comala, that is right next to the volcanic area. And then, of course, we have the wetlands, the areas that are by the coast, with these very beautiful flatlands with a lot of palm trees and a lot of crops also in here, tropical crops that we can find. This is one of the best areas for surfing, together with the coast of Oaxaca and the coast of Michoacán and Guerrero. So from here we start with all these beautiful surfing spots. This is Pascuales Beach. That is one of the most impressive areas, and we have some international tournaments here. But we also have some beautiful biodiversity and wildlife. We have this migratory Mobula race that right next to this surfer. And we have some other local birds that, well, of course, they have a wider distribution, like the osprey. And we also have a very important nesting area for sea turtles. This is a leatherback. This is the biggest sea turtle in the world, and is one of the most endangered, of course. So Colima is one of the places in Mexico where we have these species nesting. So it's a very important area of protection as well. So now we were here, Nayarit, Jalisco, Colima. Now we're going to Michoacán and Guerrero on the Pacific coast as well. So Michoacán is a very big state, as you saw. It starts in central part of Mexico, in the highlands of Mexico, all the way down. You pass the Sierra Madre here, and then you go all the way down to the Pacific coast. And in this central part, in the highlands of Michoacán, we have the Monarch Biosphere Reserve, where we actually have some very beautiful trips with natural habitat. So it is the protected area is shared from Michoacán, between Michoacán and the state of Mexico. So in Michoacán, we have two of the biggest reserves, two of the most important reserves. And these monarch reserves are part also of the Trans-Mexican Volcanic Belt. You can see this beautiful conifer forest, and there are some very high peaks here where we can find the monarch overwintering sites. But well, it's not the only thing that is beautiful and important in Michoacán state. If we go from the highlands of Michoacán, that is somewhere here where I'm pointing out, to the central parts that are also kind of highlands, but with some slopes in those central parts, we find the Pátzcuaro Lake with Janitzio Island. You can see the Janitzio Island right here with all the little houses, fishermen, very beautiful areas. But still, we have some very important endemisms here. We have the pike silverside. In Mexico, we call this pescado blanco de Michoacán, like white fish of Michoacán. And the importance of this is this is the main source of food for the people here, and of ecotourism as well, because eco and natural tourism, or cultural tourism, because these men here, these fishermen here, are fishing in a traditional way that has been done since 1600s, let's say. So this is called a butterfly net, red mariposa. You can see the shape it has and the way they fish it, kind of like catching butterflies, but in the water. And also, it's a very important cultural area because of the Day of the Dead in Janitzio, in the island I mentioned. This is the graveyard, the local cemetery, and you can see how it is all set up and dressed up, I can say, with the offerings. You can see fruit here, you can see bread, you can see a candy skull, all the candles here. So it's just a beautiful area to visit in this time of the year, November the 1st, because well, you can find also this cultural offering. In Guerrero, in the north part of Guerrero, that is close to the Sierra, as you can see, we find the Cacahuamilpa caves. This is the view from the caves, and this is the cave itself. It's one of the biggest caves in Mexico, and it's open to the public. And it has some lighting set up inside the cave, so you find more like an impressive view of the formations, the stalactites, the columns, the stalagmites. And it's a beautiful area also because, sorry, a very important area, not only a beautiful area, also because we have a high rate of endemism. For example, inside the cave or around the cave where I show you, we have at least these three that I wanted to show you, endemic species of birds. So for the swift, for the white napped swift, is not like an endemism per se, but we only find them in the central part of Mexico, and the Cacahuamilpa caves are the most important breeding area for this swift. So that's the relevant in terms of diversity and protection. So in the central part of Mexico, Guanajuato and Querétaro, I wanted to mention Guanajuato because it's the birthplace of Mexico as an independent nation. So there was a town named Dolores Hidalgo in Guanajuato state. There is still where the independence started. So it all happened here. We have this colonial city that is it used to be a mining town, Guanajuato city, and it also has some legends. It has a lot of history, and it's important, as I said, because one of the very first fights that happened due to the independence of Mexico was here in the Alhóndiga de Granaditas, which is a storage. It used to be a storage for the Spaniards here. They used to storage grains in this area, and from here they distribute those grains to the people. So when the rebellion started, when the independence war started, most of the rich families of Guanajuato get in this storage area, and they closed the doors, and they were there just hoping for the military to come and help them. But what they didn't expect is that the miners of this town, they were very strong, they were very brave for working on those mines, and they were very close to the wooden doors. They set fire on the doors, and everyone was able to go in and take prisoners and fight and get the grain for the rebellion. So it's a very important area, as I mentioned. So in terms of history in Mexico, so I wanted to mention that also. Right next to Guanajuato, we have Hidalgo State, and we have this beautiful scenery, the Basaltic Prisms. And there are some very similar in Ireland. So if you don't want to travel all the way to Ireland, you can come to Mexico in Hidalgo State, and you can find these beautiful formations. The water that we have in this area comes from a couple of dams that are higher up on the mountains, but still these are natural springs that feed all these streams and all this forest area. So in here we have some xeric areas, some more desertic or more dry forest rather than than humid forests, despite the water that we have available here. But due to the altitude and some other events like some winds that take the humidity from this area and take it to other, the area most of the time has a desertic look or a dry look in here. This area is home to some otters, some freshwater otters, of course some migratory birds that come here to spend winter, and those are very important protecting areas as well, protection areas as well. And in Querétaro state, we have the Peña de Bernal in Bernal town. This is, I found this important to mention because it's considered in some sources the third biggest monolith in the world. Supposedly the first one is Aries Rock, I think, in Australia, and then the second one, I think, is one in the States. I'm not sure, but I think it's the one where they filmed the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think. But well, what I did find is that this is considered the third or the fourth biggest monolith in the world. So it's a very nice place for climbing, of course, hiking around the place, and as well a very important area of nesting for birds. And we have in this area a little bit more variety of reptiles. We have some rattlesnakes, some other non-poisonous snakes. We also had royal eagles in these areas, and in Hidalgo, in Querétaro. So it's a very important area as well, as I mentioned. Okay, so the state of Mexico and Mexico City. Here, remember, we are in highlands in Mexico, in central Mexico, and right around the area and the area that has the Popocatépetl and the Iztaccíhuatl volcano, we find the Iztapopo or Iztaccíhuatl National Park. And of course, it's a very important area for conservation in terms of flora and fauna. As you can see, the coniferous forest right here next to the volcanic area. Some deers in this place, some endemic birds, but one that comes up more than any other is the teporingo rabbit or the Zacatuche rabbit that is endemic only to this specific area in the world, in Mexico also. So you won't find this little rabbit anywhere else in the world, except in, or even in Mexico, except in these coniferous forests of, not even in the coniferous forest, on the shrublands, grasslands of the Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl National Park. So it's something very, very beautiful to know and to protect. And in Mexico City, well, of course, you all know Mexico City is one of the most populated cities in the world. It's a cosmopolitan city, very high skyscrapers, very beautiful cultural offerings, and other things. So much to say about Mexico City, but one thing that I think is a little bit more important than the others in terms of because of the importance in terms of conservation and the services that this ecosystem has to offer to all the humans that live in this part of Mexico is the Xochimilco area. So you can see this is the state of Mexico or Mexico City, all of this. And if you have in here, central part, the Zócalo, the main plaza, is somewhere in this area of Mexico City. And to the south of that, let's say, it's the Xochimilco area. So Mexico City and all this central part of the country was built on the top of some system of lakes. We call just one lake, the Texcoco Lake, but it was actually several different lakes, Texcoco, the Xochimilco area, well, I don't remember the others, but it was a series of lakes here. And eventually they, using the water, the former inhabitants of here, they dried the lakes, and the only remnant of this lake system is Xochimilco plus some others that are Texcoco, somewhere here, that are just patches of water in this area of central Mexico. So the Xochimilco area, as you can see, these are some channels, has a very important offering that is most than anything just to come here and touristically speaking, enjoy at your day in these boats that we call trajineras, just having fun there, drinking, eating. You can get off to see some areas, specifically areas that they have some animals of the region. But basically, you just go around on the channels of Xochimilco. There are some mariachis. If you can see the central trajinera, there are mariachis. There are other trajineras that offer you drinks or food. So it's very neat to go there and just enjoy the day. But I think even more important is the history that it has and the importance that it has nowadays. So back on the days, pre-Hispanic times, the Mexica people, the Aztecs that used to live here, they built these floating gardens that we call chinampas, and they used to do this in order to take advantage of all the nutrients that are found in this mud area, in these wetlands. All this mud is a very rich area of nutrients. So it was a very important place for their crops. Instead of going to some flatland inland away from the rivers or with a more difficult access to the water, they basically invented this system of farming. So you can see here the different aspects of the chinampas that were used back on the day and that are still used nowadays for different crops. This is farming cempasúchil, marigold flower for Day of the Dead, and still nowadays a lot of the vegetables that we eat in Mexico City are harvested in this area. Of course, a lot of the organic veggies, a lot of those others are imported, but if you find, if you look to find for a organic crop or more sustainable way of getting your food, Xochimilco is the place where that can distribute all of this. So you name it and they basically have it in here. And well, this very charismatic animal, the axolotl. The axolotl is actually a salamander, but this specific species is endemic to the Xochimilco area. And the difference between this salamander and any other salamander that you can find in the world is that this species doesn't change in the, let's say, in the life cycle. So of course these are amphibians, they lay eggs, and as an amphibian they had to go through a metamorphosis in which these little things that are coming out of the head that look like some feathers, these are actually their branchial or their gills, the gills that are exposed. And this is the stage that most of the salamanders have when they are young, when they are sexually immature. So a regular salamander will change, they will, let's say, absorb those gills, the branchial appendage, they will absorb and they will develop lungs in order to survive outside of the water. With the axolotl in the Xochimilco area, they don't change, they stay on the same look as if they were immature or juvenile individuals, but they can mate. So that's a difference between any other salamander and the ajolote, the axolotl that we find in Xochimilco. And another important thing that researchers have found is that the axolotl can regenerate parts of its body. So actually you can see in here some kind of scars on the arm of this axolotl. So some experiments, or if they lose an appendage due to predation, they can regrow the leg or the tail, or in some control experiments they have done, they can regrow parts of their heart. So it's something very amazing in this with this species, with this specific species. And of course, I'm pretty sure that you have seen the pink one, the leucistic axolotl. But this leucistic, the albino and the albino white and the albino golden, those are breeds or types that were made in laboratory. So these are man-made, let's say. So of course, in nature we have some leucistic, some albino specimens, but not with the axolotl. They usually are just dark color, kind of like yellowish, brownish color. But those that are very famous that you can see on those videos on internet or on the news are all made in controlled conditions. And well, Oaxaca and Chiapas now in this area of South Mexico. Oaxaca is a very unique state in Mexico. It has the highest number of municipalities, 570, and it has the highest rate of birds in the country. In the state, they have around 700 and plus species identified for the state, from around 1,000, a little bit more species that we have in Mexico. So that is given because of the diversity of ecosystems. In this part that you can see here on the right side of the map, you can see there are some lagoons, there are some wetlands, there are very tropical areas, estuary lagoons, but we also have a lot of rivers, and all these central parts of the state, it's the southern Sierra or Madre of Mexico. So remember, we have the western and the eastern Sierra Madres, but we also have the southern Sierra Madre that goes from Guerrero, a little bit from Guerrero, but mostly Oaxaca and Chiapas state. So just imagine how many micro ecosystems we can find in here, because we can find very different conditions, weather conditions or natural conditions given for all this diversity. So well, plus that, we have beautiful and delicious meals over there. And one of the places that I found to be very interesting is Yerbelagua. Yerbelagua is a petrified waterfall that it's in the central part of Oaxaca. And this is one of only 2 places like this in the world. So this petrified waterfall basically is, so these are like what we find in caves, stalactites. You can see they start on the top, and due to the minerals and the sediments that are deposited here through the millions of years that these have been in Mexico, we find these structures, these columns basically of minerals. So you can see, so on top of some mountains, the vegetation, we have a mix of jungle and subdeciduous forest, but basically most of the time we have green areas here due to the amount of water that we can find. And it's open to the public. Some of them are open to get and swim over there. You can see on the right side of the image, the first waterfall that I mentioned, the petrified waterfall. This is also part of the same system of Yerbelagua. So it's a very beautiful place to visit as well. And in Chiapas, we find the Lacandon jungle or Selva Lacandona, which is one of the most important ecosystem in Mexico in terms of course, biodiversity, but also in terms of water resource. So if in any moment we have some water needs, extreme water needs in Mexico, Chiapas is the one that is going to save us all. So we also have a very important Mayan community, the Lacandon Mayan, and they are direct descendants of these other famous Mayans of Tikal and Chichen Itza. but of course in some other areas with its own tradition and differences. But as a jungle, we have a high variety of birds, of mammals. This is just a sample of the mammals that we might find in the Lacandon jungle. Of course, the jaguar that we can find is like top, but we also have pecaris. We also have right here the pecaris. We also have armadillos and anteaters and tapirs as well. So it's a beautiful place. As I mentioned, for bird watching as well, we have some very important communities of red macaws and, well, as I mentioned, water, some rapids, some lagoons, a lot of senderism here, a lot of hiking through the jungle. And then there is this very important national park, a very important preserve, the Montebello Lakes, Lagunas de Montebello, that are, as I mentioned, a very important reservoir of fresh water, but also a place of high endemism in the water and as well as in the jungle. And that would be it for the moment. Thank you very much. Any question?
Melissa, thank you so much. Are we going to get a part 3?
Yes, because there's a lot more. As I just put down here, there's always more to explore, and I just wanted to give a lot of time to talk about the Yucatan Peninsula, because the Yucatan Peninsula is not only Cancun or Cozumel or Tulum, beautiful areas, very relaxing places, very important in terms of partying, but there are a lot of things to see there that they truly deserve a webinar of its own.
Well, the comments are blowing up. Everybody agrees with me that we need a part 3. So
Yes.
we'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
Before we start the questions, I just want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions via the questions field in the control panel. But there's some really interesting ones already. Our guests have the most intelligent, thoughtful questions.
Okay.
So we'll start chronologically. So going back to the beginning, and actually back to last week, you mentioned about ocelots. Do you know if there's been any progress made for a corridor to the small population in South Texas, which is isolated by the wall?
Mm-hmm. I haven't heard about that. I know in Mexico we have some projects of conservation for that species specifically and for the ecosystem where they inhabit, but something like a corridor for both countries to help the population to be connected. I haven't heard yet of that.
Okay. What is the biggest threat to the leatherback sea turtles that has caused them to be endangered?
So the leatherback, being the biggest sea turtle, I'm going back to the image because it's so beautiful. They can grow the size of a beetle car. Remember the Volkswagen Beetle from the 70s, 60s? So that can be the size that they can reach. So there are some registers of that size in the world. But to reach that size, they need at least 20 years. To reach sexual maturity, they need 15 years. So just imagine how many dangers they can face in those 15 years. So in general terms, for the sea turtles, from the clutch, from the eggs that the mother lays in the beach, they survive 1% if we are lucky. So in general terms, if they lay 100 eggs, only one turtle will survive to adulthood to be sexually mature and reproduce successfully. So the chances of mating and being successful are very low. That would be one of the first. The other one, of course, is pollution. Most of the sea turtles, if not all, when they are adults, they feed on jellyfish. So the leatherback specifically feed on bigger jellyfish. They actually have some specific hooks in their mouth and their throat to catch the jellyfish and swallow. So most of the, or all of the plastic bags that we have in the ocean are easily confused, even by humans. I've been there with, you can confuse them with jellyfish. So the main threat is pollution for leatherback. And the second one that I would mention in terms of anthropogenic threats is habitat loss, because they need some specific beaches, kind of like the sand conditions or the slope conditions of the beach to lay the eggs. So when we have these resorts or these urban developments by the shore, we affect the nesting areas for sea turtles and of course for leatherbacks. So those would be it.
Excellent. Okay, so one of our viewers noticed that the size of the Mexican states varies greatly from very large to very small. How were the boundaries of the states determined?
So actually, if you notice, there's something here very, very important, very curious that I found. I don't have the information for sure, but for example, here we can, wait. We can see here, for example, very big, super small, super tiny, Mexico City and all. But if we check on these boundaries, most of the high peaks are shared by some states. So my guess through the years, what I have seen, but I don't have the certain answer of that, is that back on the day, the distribution of the land was made by natural locations. So here, for example, they just divided off from the peak, from the peak of this volcano to the right belongs to these people. From the peak of this other volcano to the left belongs to this other community. And then rivers, just like the Rio Bravo on the north. From this river to the north is from the state, from this river to the south is from Mexico, belongs to Mexico. So basically, I think that's why we have so many sizes. If you notice, Chihuahua, Coahuila, that are very huge states, they basically have flatlands, so it's kind of difficult to find a spot, an easily identified spot to tell from this area here is one state, from this area here is another state. But I'm gonna write that down, and I will have the answer to that on the next webinar.
Excellent. Can you give us a brief explanation for how the basaltic prisms are formed?
So these are basically made from volcanic activity. Just like those in Ireland, you can see the basaltic rock is a volcanic rock, and let's say similar to the obsidian stone that is a crystal. So the way that the mineral is disposed in this formation is a crystal, kind of like the salt, and makes this hexagonal shape that you can see in all these basaltic columns. So it's nothing more than through the lava process and the eruption processes that are on the central part, they just found the perfect conditions to be located, to the minerals to be located here in the perfect position to form these basaltic prisms. Basaltic refers to the rock, the basaltic rock. And then, well, prismas or prisms, because of the shape they have, similar to other crystals that we find. So basically, it's just volcanic rock, and due to the pressure and temperature conditions, they had this shape. They were put in this shape through the years.
Fascinating. Are cenotes found throughout Mexico or only in certain areas or ecosystems?
Ocelotes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are basically found in, aquí está, in this kind of environments, more or less like this one. No, where is the ecosystems? Wait, right here. Kind of like tropical deciduous forests, a little bit of like rainforest. So yeah, they are distributed basically all around Mexico because we have all of these conditions. So those ocelots that you find on Texas and all this area, I think we also find those in New Mexico in some spots. But it has to be a lot with the amount of trees that we find in the area, and of course water. So if you have a patch of forest with good source of water, with temperate weather and other mammals or prey for the ocelot, they can be found here. So I don't know if we're talking about the same species, the ocelot, the little one. This, no, tigrillo, no. This one here. Wait a second. This one here is the ocelot. This is a medium-sized feline. It's actually the size of like 2 feet, 2.5 feet long. So it's kind of like a house cat, a big house cat. That's the one, the ocelot. The jaguar that is distributed all around Mexico from north to south, and it goes all the way to the States as well, is this huge animal here. But I think it's kind of easy to tell one from the other. So, but even though, I mean, if you're asking about the ocelot, yes, just what I said. It depends on the conditions. If you have the proper conditions on in terms of food, water, and ecosystem, let's say big trees for them to climb and protect themselves or rest, you can find those.
Okay, and you'd mentioned that there are only 26 wild jaguars. Are there any programs to increase the numbers?
I'm talking about marismas nacionales only. I'm talking about this specific area of Mexico. In this area of Mexico, they have identified 26 jaguars only in this area, but we find jaguars all over Mexico from north to south to the peninsula. And these 26 individuals are living only in these 500 square miles. So in general terms, jaguars are very territorial, and they need a lot of territory because they need a lot of food, a lot of water, and one male mates with different females, so he travels to different female territories. So let's say one female is the one male jaguar has different female territories within his own territory. So in Marismas Nacionales, in this area, we have 26 jaguars. That means that it is a very very big population of jaguars only in this specific part.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, and still, yes, there are a lot of projects all around Mexico to recover the jaguar population.
Well, I think that's the last question we have time for today, so I will hand it back to you for closing comments.
Yep. Thank you. Let me think. I'm just checking that okay. I just had some other information, but I will give you that information later. So here, yeah. I don't know if you can you see my phone right there, Sunny?
Yes.
Okay, that's a map of the distribution of the jaguar.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I will show that in a bigger photo later on the next webinar. So closing comments, we'll just once again visit Mexico, do your research, check what we have to offer. There's more we are talking about biodiversity right now, but there's a lot of culture, a lot of history, and I always say a lot of gastronomy. So there's a lot of things to see. There's always more to explore. I will keep that motto, that saying, as my new motto. So just thank you for being here today, and I'll see you on the next webinar.
Melissa, thank you again. It's always a pleasure. I learned so much from you, and have developed a very long list of places I need to go visit now, thanks to you. And everybody is looking forward to part 3. So let us know when that's going to happen. I want to thank everybody who tuned in today. Please join us again tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye-bye.